Hey everyone. So I've made available the materials uh, for this week. I think so. I'm going to give you a little disclaimer on the materials for this week. I mean, some of it, some of you can feel is disturbing. I mean, it is disturbing, and it may impact some of you differently than others. So I just want you to be aware of that. But the fact of the matter is, what you're going to be learning about is it's the reality of the history of the treatment of people with disabilities, and uh, there are a lot of materials, and there's a couple different things that you need to submit. It'll be clear once you review the materials. So, but do plan on a good chunk of time to get through the readings and the other multimedia resources. So, um, I think they're highly engaging and interesting and should be beneficial to you. Uh, for me, so one thing I'll say here is, some people with this course, I've been teaching this course for a long time, and you know, the I I think a critique of some about this course is a little too much focus on history and maybe not as much about nuts and bolts. Little context for that is that so many, really all of your courses are really focused on the nuts and bolts of your respective professions, whether it's school psychology, special education, or speech pathology, whatever that may be. And I believe that it is critical that we understand the history and the treatment of people with disabilities. And I think if you look around of some of our current practices, um, you'll still find elements of that historical treatment. One of the biggest challenges for me is a long time person involved in the field of special education is that uh, the progress has come very slowly. Now, if you look at the most extreme examples, obviously that's not what we're talking about. But if we start to talk about things like equal access, the broad concept of inclusion, uh, it's my opinion that we're still very much working in those directions. And honestly, for me, sometimes it can be a little disheartening to see where we remain static. Last week, I provided you with just a little introduction about kind of my professional and personal background. But to go a little more in depth than that, I was surrounded by people with disabilities my whole life growing up, and uncles and cousins who had significant disabilities, and until I got older, really, and I guess probably started pursuing special education. I didn't have a good grasp of what we might call invisible disabilities or mild disabilities, things like learning disabilities and behavior. But I was around people with significant physical and intellectual disabilities, and I have a pretty, I guess, unique perspective of a lot of that. I had an uncle who had a very pronounced case of epilepsy, which resulted in intellectual disabilities and physical disabilities, and just seeing how the family contended with many of those challenges, and coming from a family from kind of deep in Appalachia, Cumberland Gap, Kentucky, Tennessee. Some might say a little backwards. Um, and how they dealt with that. And I remember when I was in my doctoral program taking a history of special ed course at the University of Oregon, people being so shocked of the historical perspective of that disability was a direct a direct punishment from God. And it's interesting because I grew up with kind of that perspective that my grandfather believed that because he didn't become a preacher when uh, he should have, and he didn't start going to church, that God actually punished him with a son that that was dependent on him for the rest of his life. So the reason I believe, kind of bring it full circle and not get too in depth, the reason I believe this is so important is because even though it's history, it's not that detached from some beliefs you still hear about today. So I think this information is interesting and also very valuable. So I hope you'll enjoy it. I always tell people, if you're, I don't like people to feel overwhelmed, but you're, most of you are in grad school, this is why you're here, you know, make a pot of coffee or whatever, and, just go through this material and learn and process it. So, uh, so stepping away from that, I try not to make these videos too long. But, as I alluded to in an email last week, yeah, I really like one on one with students. And I actually like teaching online too. I think it provides us some great opportunities for teaching and learning if it's done well. And I'm always trying to get better at it. But I do like the personal connection. So, some of you just want to be on autopilot and do your own thing. That's fine, of course. But if you want to talk and about these issues or even your careers, I am available, and it's the best part of my job is being able to have those conversations with people, whether it's about career or course content, or even capstone projects that you might be engaged in. So just keep that in mind. Uh, don't ever feel like you're on an island and detached, because just reach out and we'll set up whatever kind of meeting we need to. So I hope you have a great week and enjoy the content.